Welcome back to ETNAtalks. In the world of healthcare, we often treat the body with science and the person with care. But how do we bridge the gap when a patient's cultural reality clashes with medical protocols? In this episode, we travel across the Atlantic to Philadelphia to sit with Dr. Beth Chiatti, a professor at Drexel University and a distinguished fellow of the European Transcultural Nursing Association. Dr. Chiatti offers a perspective that is rare in our field. Before she became a neuroscientist, she was trained as an anthropologist. This unique background gives her a dual lens. She sees clinical facts, but she also sees the cultural webs of meanings that surround every patient. From her deep ethno-nursing research with the Ethiopian immigrant community to her current role teaching genetics and genomics, Dr. Chiatti is a master at navigating the delicate space where hard science meets human belief. Dr. Chiatti, welcome to ETNAtalks.
Hi, Juan. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to speak on the ETNAtalks podcast. That was so kind of you, and it's a pleasure to be here.
It is my honor, and I'm sure it's all the listeners' honor. So, Beth, can I call you Beth?
Yes, please.
Okay, lovely. Beth, I want to start with your unique background. Before you became a nurse, as I said, you earned a bachelor in anthropology. I often think of anthropology as the study of people and nursing as the care of people. Do you remember a specific moment in your early clinical practice when your inner anthropologist kicked in and you realized that medicine alone wasn't going to solve a patient problem?
Yes, in fact, I feel like I was always interested in culture. So, as you said, I had been a hospital based nursing diploma graduate, and I had a bachelor's degree in anthropology. And I decided to return to the university after quite a few years and get my bachelor's degree in nursing. And one of our very first courses was nursing theory. I had never heard of nurse theorists or any kind of nursing theory before. And we had a book and we were assigned to read about different theories. And I found this so interesting that I decided to go through the book and read about all of them. And as I paged through the textbook, I came across the theorist Dr. Madeline Leiniger. I
Mhm.
was captivated. That is the theory that spoke to me, the theory of culture, care, diversity, and universality. It made so much sense to me through my lens as an anthropologist and a nurse. So I later joined the Transcultural Nursing Society, and I was fortunate to meet and speak with Dr. Leiniger at the annual
Wow.
conferences. So I actually got to know her. And then when
Wow.
I found the European Transcultural Nursing Association, I also joined it because I was really interested, of course, in culture. So, what was going on across the pond? I really owe my career satisfaction and pursuing higher education because I then got my master's and my doctoral degrees, not only to Dr. Leiniger, but to all the other transcultural giants. And I'll mention a few. We know the founder of Aetna is Dr. Rena Papadopoulos. I had heard her speak. I actually cited her work in my dissertation. So I knew of Rena. Then Dr. Hibawe Bialama, I adapted many of her questions from her open inquiry guide into my research, and she really helped mentor me through my dissertation. And other giants that don't even know they made a difference in my life. Dr. Marilyn McFarland, Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Dula Pacquiao, Dr. Rachel
Oh, yeah.
Spector,
Mhm.
Dr. Marianne Jeffries, Dr. Larry Purnell, Dr. Rick Zuha, and there are so many, many others that influenced my life and taught me about transcultural nursing. I also felt it was important to take transcultural nursing courses. So I took two of them. One was with Dr. Susan Hassanow, and the other was with Dr. Hibawe Bialama. And so I found these very helpful because it taught me how to be a transcultural nurse. So along the way, in my academic pursuits, I actually tried to focus my projects on cultural issues or even subcultures. So when I got my MSN, my project was tuberculosis prevention and control guidelines for homeless service agencies and shelters. So I was looking at that subpopulation, and I
Mm-hmm.
worked with our local health department, and that's how I helped them with this. And then when I got my school nurse certification, my project was policy and procedures for early intervention to transition to kindergarten. And I worked with the school district of Philadelphia. And the work of both of these projects, they still have these and they use those. So I felt like I contributed to
For s-
my community.
for
But
sure.
when I said I was interested in culture, um, I think even in my earlier life, I was interested in it, but I couldn't articulate it that this was culture at the time. So, with my history, I'm actually adopted. And growing up, although I had wonderful, loving parents, I always knew I was different. Something was different. And I didn't realize it until I was an adult that it was a cultural difference. And my immediate family is actually very multicultural. My husband is an immigrant from Italy. He's
Mm-hmm.
actually an immigration lawyer. Our son was born in the United States. He's an archaeologist, but he primarily works in the Middle East. Our daughter was adopted from China, and she's an elementary school teacher. And I have been fortunate as an adult to find members of my original birth family, and they are from many, many cultures. So it's been very
Wow,
interesting.
it
But
is.
getting back to your original question, we really live in a diverse and complex world. There are many diverse perspectives and values and experiences, and it's important for us to provide care that's culturally respectful and therapeutic for our patients so that our patients feel heard. And in this way, we're really able to build rapport and trust with patients. I've had many culturally different patients where I've worked, and I try to teach students to learn what is important to our patients and their families because our goal is patient centered care and family centered care. And primarily, I've been in maternal, child, and pediatric health. So it's often family centered care. And it's important for us to appreciate the uniqueness and the value of each individual and recognize the significance of culture to their lives so that we can provide health care that's meaningful to them and that's not
Absolutely.
detrimental.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it in a nutshell.
It is. I was writing down here that it is at the end. It's not important. It's not about us. It's
Right.
about them. And
Exactly.
yeah, I think that's like the main stone. And I also was writing down my ideas because the students many times complain about theory, like theory is boring. What about theory? Why theory? But theory is always there and necessary, isn't it?
It is. It is. I was fascinated and it doesn't mean that I understood all of them
No, no,
because
no, no, for
some of the
sure.
theories went way over my head, but they were so interesting. And then that's the way I found Dr. Leiniger, and that really was the focus of the rest of my career.
Mhm. It is. Once you understand it, and once you feel that this is necessary and meaningful, is you need theory for almost everything.
Yeah, it was
And
serendipity how I found
serendipity.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It could be. It could be. And also, you have done extensive research with the Ethiopian immigrant community using Leninger's ethno-nursing method. For our listeners who might not be familiar with this specific population, what was the biggest disconnect you found between how these families viewed health and illness versus how the Western healthcare system was trying to treat them?
Yes, this was so interesting to me. I mentioned that my husband is from Italy. He actually lived in Ethiopia for 6 years.
Oh,
He was a principal of a school there. And then when our son was getting his master's degree in archaeology, he did field work in Ethiopia. So
oh,
I heard stories that they would both tell me about the country and the people. And of course, I had patients from Ethiopia. So I had wanted to learn more. So when I started my research, I thought, this is what I want to do for my dissertation.
oh,
And I researched that they had a strong history of folk medicine in Ethiopia, that certain conditions could be treated first by folk medicine and maybe exclusively by folk medicine, and others required Western type medicine. So I wanted to learn more about these different beliefs and these different practices. So at the time when I started my research, Ethiopian immigrants were the second largest African immigrant population in the United States.
oh, really?
And so I did a qualitative ethno nursing study. It was called Culture, Care, Beliefs, and Practices of an Ethiopian Immigrant Community. And I used Leininger's model and the Sunrise Enabler. And so I applied the transcultural care decisions such as culture care, preservation, and maintenance, culture care, accommodation, and negotiation, and culture care repatterning and restructuring to my work. And I published this in the Journal of Transcultural Nursing in 2019. So
Wow.
the history that I had, found was this history of traditional medicine or folk medicine that was widely practiced. And their medical system was described as medico religious. And it was only after World War II that Ethiopia began to build modern hospitals and sought Western trained doctors, nurses, and midwives. And they believed that good health was maintained by a state of balance, and that
Mm,
things like extremes in hot and cold, food and drinks, happiness and sorrow, all of those things could lead to disequilibrium and problems in physical or emotional health. I also found that nurses were the backbone of the healthcare system in Ethiopia. There's a critical doctor shortage. And even now, today, the latest statistics I found in 2022, there is one doctor for every 9,000 to 10,000 people in the country.
wow.
But doing my lit review, when I go back, I did my lit review, I found, which was erroneous, I actually found that Ethiopians did not want Western style healthcare. They wanted to preserve this folk medicine care. And in fact, as an example, pregnant patients preferred to labor at home, and they would show up to deliver at the very last minute. That's what they said.
Uh-huh.
However, in reality, what I found with my population showed that they actually preferred Western type medicine. They preferred diagnostic tests and the latest technology. They felt that this was good medical care. Pregnant patients actually wanted fetal monitoring because it reassured them that the fetus was doing well. And I came to the realization that the reason for this disparity was because I think years ago, these high tech tests and this type of care was not available to patients in
Uh-huh.
Ethiopia. So they really didn't have them. And also, due to the infrastructure, hospitals were only located in the large cities. Most of the population resided in rural areas. So any kind of health care they got were from local clinics. The roads were unpaved. It took them time, a lot of time, even to get to these local clinics. So this was not even available to them. So when they did come to the United States and they saw that there was great health care here, they wanted to take advantage of it and they liked it.
Oh,
So I did find that there were five themes in my research, so I can go through those. Um, I think we have time for
Sure,
that.
sure.
So the first one was preserving cultural heritage is vital to the sense of self and community. So my population wanted to retain their cultural identity. They were proud of their heritage. There was a big history of helping each other. They would take in new immigrants to the United States. They would often have them living in their homes. They would help them to find housing, an Ethiopian church, schools for their children, affordable health care. And they actually developed a Ethiopian community center where everyone could meet and they could help each other. It was important for them to maintain their diet because there are certain foods that Ethiopian they prefer to eat. They also prefer to eat at home and not in restaurants because of the evil eye. So they like to eat at home. There are certain herbs that help maintain their health. So they would take things like ginger and coffee and honey for tummy aches, um, ginger and hot orange juice for a cough. Honey played an important part. Honey, garlic, and things to put on the skin for skin conditions. Butter for the hair and skin care. They also feel that spicy food, which they eat, which causes sweating, keeps them healthy. None of the Ethiopians will eat pork in any religion. They don't eat pork. And there are also a lot of fasting days, about 160 to 250 fasting days during the year
Uh-huh.
where they do not eat animal products and they usually just eat once towards the evening. So this is important for nurses to know. Another theme was supporting the supportive family and friends was important to maintaining health care. So people are usually living in family groups, and there's a tradition of women helping women. Joint decisions about health care are made by spouses now, but in the past, usually there was an elder that would make these decisions. So elders are held in high esteem. And in fact, in many families, they may still ask an elder to
Uh-huh.
help them make a decision. The next one was prayer is very important. Religion and prayer is important. So the church played an important part in a feeling of community, in education and support. Very often, churches would hold presentations for the members talking about healthcare. In this country, it's important about health insurance,
Yes.
citizenship, and they even gave language classes in Amharic to the children. The fourth theme was freedom to provides opportunity. So there was freedom in this country. They found political freedom, also an ability to have education. So they had better education opportunities and ability to have life-saving health care. Many immigrants were working 2 and 3 jobs and attending school at the same time. So they were able to provide for their family. They were trying to do better and get a better job because of the education, and they were still able to send money back to their family. And then the fifth and last theme was culture care and therapeutic communication by the nurse is essential to the patient's sense of well-being. Nurses, because they were the backbone of healthcare in Ethiopia, everyone knew this, and they hold nurses in high esteem. But they do want nurses to spend time with them and learn about what is important to them. So they respected nurses' knowledge, they respected medical technology, but they felt sometimes that nurses didn't ask them what was important and didn't spend enough time with them. That
Uh-huh.
nurses would come into the room, ask them something, and speed out of the room
Yep.
and
And
didn't
go.
really spend enough time. Another problem that they found was there was a lack of translators and interpreters, and this limited their access to care. And so these were the two big things. One of my informants actually said they wanted nurses to be a partner in their care. So they really trusted nurses and they trusted their opinion, and they wanted nurses to actually learn more what was important to them. What I found, though, that was very important for us in nursing was that Ethiopians typically do not practice preventive care, such as
Mhm.
health screenings like mammograms and things like
Yeah.
that. So we could really make an important change with them. So when we talk about culture care repatterning and restructuring, we can promote preventive care and health screenings, that will really help them with health care and health in the future.
Wow, Dr. Chiatti, that this is fascinating, and I was thinking that you really were able to deeply know them. I mean, you were there with them and for them, and this as a community nurse specialist, this is fascinating because you need to know your community, their reality, and their specific needs. And I also wrote down this is like for me this is like the magical effect of academic ethnography. I mean, it's a privilege to be able to get to know in depth the community, your patients, etc. And also I think it's very important, and this is like a I don't know, like a watermark in all the interviews that I have done. Most of the people who has participated in the podcast, they always mention trust. So that might be important because I think patients and communities and people need to trust nurses and all the healthcare team.
Yes,
So
it truly was a privilege. I felt
it
like
is.
that. It was a privilege. And in fact, when you mentioned trust, I had to gain an entree to the community, and it actually took a year. I would
Wow.
go for a year every Sunday to the church, and the priest in the church actually helped me gain an entree to the community. And then I was able to set up a table after church and actually speak with people. But it took a year. So you really were gaining a trust.
Wow. And it makes sense. I mean, it's like you are the outsider for them. So
Yes, right.
exactly. Wow. So interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Oh,
And
you're
also,
welcome.
I think there's also a fascinating thing in your career is that you teach genetics and genomics, which sounds like very hard, like very objective science. But when you're counseling a family about genetic risks, for example, you're often dealing with deep beliefs about fate, destiny, or even God's will. How do you explain a genetic probability to a family whose culture relies on fatalism or with like negative things without dismissing their beliefs?
Right, right. You really have to walk a fine line with this and try not to put all of your, opinions on
Mhm.
people. A little bit of my background, I worked as a nurse genetic counselor. It was in reproductive
Ah,
genetics at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. So I have certification in genomic competencies for nurses. I'm also a member of ISONG, which is the International Society of Nurses in Genetics.
ah.
And I had authored an article and some co-authored textbook chapters. And I really feel genetics and genomics is like a basis of healthcare. So there is a huge history of ethnic and racial disparities,
Mhm.
especially when we look at genetic testing. So I noticed when I practiced some of the barriers to genetic testing was just basic information provided by healthcare providers. We never shared this with patients. There was a lack of knowledge about risks, especially related to different cultural risks and genetic conditions. There was also a fear of misuse of genetic testing. In this country, there was the eugenics movement and the Tuskegee experiments,
Yeah.
which were unethical. And that wasn't the only one. There were many, even up to, the present time, there have been unethical studies. And so there's been a problem with mistrust of healthcare practitioners and distrust of the whole medical system. And then a big issue in this country is with health insurance. Um, who is going to cover the testing? And then some of these tests are very expensive. And so we find that in some cultures, they can't afford testing because they don't actually have insurance.
Oh.
So looking at some of my recommendations that I was thinking about would include providing education about genetic testing and make this education available, especially when we talked about informed decision making and improved communication.
Mhm.
So, how can we do this? What can we do to have more minorities or minoritized groups learn about how their contribution can be so important to genetics and genetic testing? So it's important for nurses to go on these like information campaigns about the benefits of genetic testing. And every time we talk to patients, we need to be knowledgeable about genetics and genomics and share our information with them.
Yes, sure.
And then advancing the role that racial and ethnic minorities play in really shaping genetic research. There's so much they can offer, and there's so much that's important that we need to learn about. So we have to develop, policies to address people of different ethnic, social, and even look at legal aspects of genomic medicine and change these. So that was what I thought about as a practitioner. And I used to really teach patients more about the basics of genetics and genomics and tell them my opinion, but not really push them. Try
Yeah.
to lead them, but I would try to inform them, I guess, with education. But now it's interesting. So now I teach students about genetics and genomics. So I have a completely different role. And I really feel that nurses have to be prepared. Um, with genetics, we're in this new era that it's like the basis of healthcare to me, which it was very different when I was, a new nurse. It wasn't really available, but now it is. And nurses will see in patients' charts the pedigree's done and they'll say, oh, what is this? And that's the basis of
Wow.
genetics and genomics. So I think it's important for us to learn how to educate patients and families. And I talk to students about that now when I teach them how to do a pedigree and that they'll see this, they'll come back or tell me after practicing for a while, they'll say, oh, I saw this on the chart and now I understand it. Now I know what it means. So it's important for nurses to have educational preparation
It is, it is.
in genetics and genomics now.
You said you
And
mentioned you mentioned we need to learn. We need to learn, and this is something I always say to my students. No, I mean, we need to learn every day. It's like at the end of our career, and we will be learning as well.
exactly, exactly. Uh, I did have, this was many, many years ago when I was teaching at another school. I had a student who was graduating, and she actually said something like, now I don't have to open a textbook anymore. And I thought, oh boy, are you
No,
wrong about
no.
that?
Wrong answer.
Right, nursing is a lifelong learning,
Yes, it is. It
lifelong learning. So
and it's a privilege as well. I mean, if you think about it, it's a privilege to have a profession that you need to be always uh, getting new knowledge, getting new attitudes, and then yeah, it's like a recycling process. I don't know, but
it
for
is.
me, it's a privilege. Yeah.
It is. And I give students examples often of things that I was taught or practice I did when I was a new nurse and how that has changed over the years. And we don't do that anymore.
Anymore.
And
Yeah.
they're amazed. I mean, when I started nursing, we still had glass IV bottles, and now
Yes.
they have the bags. So, I they often think I was nursing in the dark ages, but it's so different now, and you have to
Yeah.
keep up with everything.
Let's move on. I mean, Beth, you are in, I would say that you are in a unique position, uh, because as an American, you are fellow of the European Transcultural Nursing Association. It's like myself as a European, I'm member of the Transcultural Nursing Society, and this is always nice to I don't know to change geographical places. Do you notice any difference in the flavor of transcultural nursing between the US and Europe? And I would also say, are we Europeans tackling the same problems, or do we have different approaches? I don't know. How do you see us, the Europeans?
Yeah, this was such an honor to be a fellow of Aetna. And I love Aetna because it provides a lot of resources for transcultural care. Um, I think there are similarities. I believe that healthcare is a human right, and I think that is the belief in Europe. It's not a belief in everyone here in the United States, unfortunately, but it's something that I believe. And so I think as transcultural nurses, we really need to look at the big picture,
Hmm.
especially here in the United States, of how policy affects our patients and affects our profession. It's important for us to advocate for both. And I see that advocacy very much with European transcultural nurses. We all have to
Really?
provide culturally sensitive care and healthcare that's meaningful and beneficial. And I think in the United States, we can learn from nurses in Europe and around the world. I actually, in Sigma for about 8 years now, I've belonged to a group that looks at um, leadership. I'm a mentor in the global leadership mentoring community, and I've actually mentored nurses from different countries: Pakistan, Australia, and the UK. And the nurses in the UK were actually both immigrants to the UK. And I feel that I've been able to learn so much more by being a mentor, that I don't just look at things through a US lens, but I've been able to look at the big picture and how we can help patients globally. So I feel like there are differences, although I can't really articulate them, except that we have to advocate more. And instead of having things be so narrow, we have to really look at healthcare as a right.
Yeah. The good thing is that at the end we are all nurses.
Right.
No matter if we are Americans or Spanish or wherever, at the end we are nurses. And I would say that we share a main goal. So it's not a geographical issue. I think it's like an ontological, epistemological issues of being a nurse.
Yes.
And I think this is my final question. You are heavily involved in the Transcultural Nursing Society, as you mentioned, and also this global mentorship with Sigma. If you could give one piece of advice to a nurse manager, for example, listening to this podcast, which I'm sure some manager will listen, um, what would you say? I mean, what would be your step one?
Step one. I think nurse managers, and in fact, all nurses, have to realize what an impact they're making on patients, families, communities, and especially as nurse managers on other nurses. So it's really important for us to support new nurses, to try to bring colleagues forward, nominate them for awards and honors, collaborate with them on projects, write articles together, and make nurses feel important. People talk about nursing all the time that you have burnout. I mean,
Yeah.
all the time they're talking about burnout. And I feel that nursing is such a good profession to prevent burnout. It's one of the best professions. There's always something new to learn. There are new challenges, new patient populations, new skills, new environments that if you've had it in one area, you can always do something else. And
Yeah.
I think it's important for nurse managers to recognize this, that make it more interesting for their the nurses that work with them, and show them different ways of doing things or different ideas of, and if they're tired of being in one area, have them realize that there's so much more to do in nursing. For me, it was the best profession I could have picked, and it was actually my second choice. My first was elementary education, and there were no jobs when I was in school. So I went, my second was a nurse, and it's the best profession I ever picked.
I wanted to be an art teacher. And at the end,
Nice.
and at the end, I went for nursing. So totally different. So, Dr. Chiatti, thank you so much for bridging the gap between genes and geography for us today. It's been a real pleasure. It's been an honor. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning to Etna Talks. Remember, cultural care isn't just about language, it's about understanding the life behind the chart. Thank you, Dr. Chiatti. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Juan. It was an honor for me. I really appreciate it. It was great speaking with you.
It's been a lovely time. And for our listeners, don't forget to become a member of Etna. It's for free. You can do it in our website. And see you in the next episode of Etna Talks. Bye.